all new session by Civom. Today, we are here to celebrate Global Day of Parents 2024, and this session is dedicated to all the parents, educators, therapists, tutors, and everyone who is excited about the future of education. Today, we have the honor of going live with three of the most iconic personalities who are reshaping the world of education and learning spaces. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time that I raise the curtains and welcome all three of them. On first, we have the president of Podar Education Network, Dr. Swati Popat Vats, a global educator with more than 3 decades of experience. She is the president of the Early Childhood Association and Association for Primary Education and Research, and a member of the planning committee of the World Forum Foundation, as well as a member of global think tank of Kidzania. Welcome to this session, Swati ma'am. We are extremely delighted to have you joining us live.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And now we have a visionary educator who founded Kangaroo Kids and Billabong High Schools, a TEDx speaker, happiness advocate, and author whose innovative vision has led to partnerships in 17 cities in India, Dubai, and Maldives. A proven leader in education with over 30 years of experience and the founder of Dreamtime Learning. It's none other than Miss Lina Ashar. Lina ma'am, welcome to the session. It's an honor to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you. And it's just always an honor to share a screen or a stage with Swati.
Yeah.
So, our third guest speaker is Mr. Yogendra Patidar, Director of Civom. Here's a young, award winning entrepreneur, Business World 40 Under 40 Education Award, who's passionate about changing education in India and beyond. He's a graduate of both EDII Ahmedabad and JNV, and he co founded Civom, a company that designs learning spaces to help students become future leaders. He's also involved in other businesses and loves technology, philosophy, literature, fashion, and supporting his team. Welcome to this session, Yogi sir.
And when you welcome Yogi sir, he disappears.
He'll bounce back again like a rock star. I'll welcome him again.
Uh,
So now it's time to make this session even more exciting. For everyone in the audience, I welcome you all to put your questions in the comment section, and we'd be happy to have them here during the Q&A round. So let's kickstart this session with a quick fire round. Every guest speaker will have 1 minute each to answer a question. And the question is, what excites you the most about next gen learning? And does it benefit students and how? So let's hear it from Swati ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. And happy World Global Parents Day to all the parents out there. You're doing something which is amazing, bringing up the next generation. And this next generation definitely needs next generation learning, which means not to learn the way we learned with a blackboard in front of us and sitting in a desk and bench, but moving, participating, social learning, learning with my own individual styles. That is next gen learning. Understanding that technology can be a tool and not thinking that technology is a danger and it needs to be banned from classrooms. So that's not next gen learning. So it's very, very important that we become more individualized in our learning, more resilient in our learning. And I think the NEP 2020 has set the roadmap for us. All we have to do is to infuse the NEP with our model of next generation learning and ensure that every child in our classrooms thrive. For me, next gen learning is when schools will stop putting up advertisements saying these five children got above 90%. That means you were able to do a good job only with five children. For me, that is next gen learning.
Wonderful answer, Swati ma'am. Let's have the same question for Lina ma'am. Over to you.
so as Swati said, happy Parents' Day to all of you out there. I feel for you. I know that change has never been as exponential as it is today. And I know the kind of fear and wariness that comes with it. So it's natural to be wary of AI and all the new technologies. I want parents to understand that our brains have kind of evolved for survival, and we're wired to fear the unknown, and that's kind of kept humanity safe for generations. But things have to change very, very quickly. We have to stop thinking of AI as, as a cause of worry about privacy, the loss of human touch in teaching, and the potential for job displacement. These are normal things that kind of occupy our mind space when we think about AI. We can also think about AI as an education, a really, really powerful tool. And all I want parents to kind of understand is a lot of how your children see the next gen learning, how teachers see the next gen learning, will largely depend on the narrative we choose to tell ourselves as parents and educators. So we can see next gen learning through a lens of fear and caution, or absolutely from a scope of abundance and possibility. And I see next gen learning through the lens of abundance and possibility. All sorts of possibilities of enhancing learning experiences, as Swati had sort of mentioned.
Incredible answer. Thank you, Lina ma'am. Yogi sir, it's your turn, please.
Uh, I would like to connect the dots onto the Gurukul idea of learning, where it's not only about learning for occupation, okay, and learning for self elevation. We a lot of us striving for a competitive exam and reaching to that goal. I wanted to be CA my whole life. My struggle is to be at CA. Once I become CA and I see the world, it is very different. Okay, and then I go at midlife, I achieve things financially, and then I see another midlife crisis coming to me. Okay, then I start thinking of repurposing myself. So when we see connection to self elevation is going to be human nature, as we are innate learners inside us. So how that innate learning keep going till at any times. So I put it how we put our self intelligence in the thought process, how we put social intelligence in the thought process, how we put adaptive intelligence in the thought process. And rather than thinking about what to learn, or it's more about how to learn, and getting your own self elevation. You're purposing your own thinking. So if parents really think about that as a bigger goal, because I'm a parent, and I try to see if I can let this narrative set for my kid in terms of not looking at what's happening in the world, but getting more internal learning or internal thinking. Okay, that's where we can let them elevate their own paths. So for me, next gen learning is more about going again back to the Gurukul idea, or elevating your own self. So that should be the next gen learning. Whatever time is going to come out, we'll get out. So that's where I feel next gen learning is.
Perfect. Amazing take by Yogi sir. Thank you, Yogi sir. And that calls for the close of quickfire round. After the super exciting quickfire round, let's head on to the part one of our discussion, unveiling next gen learning. This is an open discussion, and I invite Yogi sir to briefly discuss the core principles of next gen learning with respect to personalization, project based learning, and social emotional learning.
um, from this idea, like I said, personalization, like internalization of your own self. That's where you learn. So what is your North Star matrix? And if I can understand that, that's what going to get me, and that's always come through exploration. So next gen learning is about exploring wide range of things, creating interdiscipline, mixing history with some mathematics. There can be a number of possibilities in today's time. Look at I give an example of camera designer. So someone who's a camera designer, what kind of interdiscipline he might be going through. Okay, so his passion for photography, to understanding optical sciences, all of that, digital electronics, it takes a very different mix of things. And how many times we see a camera designer going pass by through you. So it's about very strong niches coming in by your interest, and it can be any direction, from hobbies, passion, to subject interest. Okay, so this is where you have to see it personalized level, that how I'm interested in whatever I am as a person. And all this comes through exploration, and that's where comes out the project based learning. So I say, like Dr. Ken Robinson used to ask one thing, what is learning,
I think that's
schools, and education. How do we define these three things? So learning is like acquiring new skills and knowledge, where education designed or planned program for learning, whereas schools are a community where education ought to happen. And the feedback here given is humans love learning, okay, and we don't enjoy education, and we have serious problem with schools, okay. So why that gap? Because whatever innate learners are, we are lifelong learners. But when we look at education and when we look at schools, that innateness is not supporting. So we have last time I had given example of pizza based learning. So we have periodic learning. We eat one slice, the period changes to another slice, versus human brain is wired like noodles. We get one thought and then gets another thought. So it's a more noodle learning rather than a pizza learning. Okay. So is our learning designed around it? So PBL is a similar concept where you work for a project, you intertwine anything around it as an individual, and you learn through that. So it's supporting a innate learning methodology of a brain science. As simple as that. Another example I give is about amygdala, the emotional sensor of brain. Okay. So if I ask any one who's there as a parent also, or as a audience also, remember the most frustrating time of your 12th class. Okay, you will get it right away. How does it work? So the cognitive science says when amygdala, the emotional sensor, the organ, stores emotion and memories together. Okay, now that's where I feel how does this emotional, social emotional learning can paired around the environment you are into. Okay, and how does it, so it's about again what we know about learning as science and putting it into the learning structures as it is natural as humans can be. So that's what I feel should get connected to.
okay. In this context, I now turn on to Swati ma'am. Ma'am, could you please share how are schools implementing these principles in classrooms and also the real world examples of differentiated instruction or personalized learning approaches?
So, recently on LinkedIn, I have put a poster called the A to Z of different kinds of learners. And it's very important that parents and teachers understand that learning in every child would be different. I may be a polymathic learner, which means I'm interested in different subjects and different aspects of different subjects. Or I may be a social learner, and you are making me sit individually. So it's very important that now there are a few schools. Lina started a whole revolution in that, where curriculum was the king, where content becomes the king, and everything revolves around child development. And sadly, we still have parents who choose schools based on it looks very nice, it has grand ambience, or it does fabulous marketing, instead of focusing on, are the teachers trained? And when we talk about teachers training, it's more about understanding how children learn and why children fail. So it's very, very important that when we talk about next gen learning, like for example, in our schools, we've done away with the chalk talk and all the traditional format of teaching. I'll give you a simplest example. When we want to show pictures to children, or we want to show any flashcards to children, we either use a technology and show it on a screen, or the teacher sits with flashcards and then she shows them one by one. Instead of that, why don't you do independent learning with a gallery walk? You put up those pictures in the classroom and let the children see them the way they want to see those pictures. This is next gen learning. Next gen learning is not about the teacher having the power and sharing learning the way she wants to. Next gen learning is about you as a teacher taking a back seat and just becoming a mentor, and let the children take the initiative, let the children learn how they want to learn. We just heard about the amygdala. There is a concept called rad learning. R stands for your reticular activation system, which is where focus happens. A stands for amygdala, which means don't do things in the classroom which would activate the negative emotional center of the child. And D stands for dopamine, the short form of which is dope. And most children are on drugs these days because they want that shot of dopamine, which they are not getting in their everyday activities. Now, when a teacher is able to combine these three together, rad learning happens. And this happens through stories, this happens through games, this happens through giving me autonomy. When you take away all these three, rad learning is not going to happen. So when we talk about next gen learning, it has to be seen in the classroom. And for that, we need teachers who believe in it. We need parents who believe in it. Otherwise, I've seen teachers who say, ma'am, I want to do this, but the parents want it the old way. So we need to educate parents what children want and what children need and what their brains need. Lina and I both believe in neuroscience. It's very important for everybody to understand when you talk about learning, learning happens in the brain. If you don't understand the brain, then you not understood learning at all. So for me, in a classroom, if a teacher becomes a brain builder, that means learning next gen or whatever gen is definitely happening, because then she is understanding how the child needs to learn and what the child needs to learn. So these kind of experiences, examples, I think need to be talked about. Teachers need to see them in action. When I introduced this in the classroom, teachers were, oh my God, how will we do this? We have so many children in the classroom, it will take time. And then once they started using it, they all became confident and they all realized that we as humans have one problem, and that is change. We take a long time to change things. And I think it's time to change things overnight now in education, because too many decades of the age old kind of education.
It's a fast failing models, fail
Yeah,
fast, learn
exactly.
better.
Absolutely.
So that was a pretty impressive take. And now I turn this over to Lina ma'am and I request her to share her experience and insights on how next gen learning benefits students and also discuss how parents can be effective advocates for their children in this changing learning environment. Like, what questions or concerns do parents have about learning for their children?
So I'm gonna move the focus a little bit away from how we learn. That teachers need to know how we learn, to actually focus on why we learn. Why do we actually learn? Um, we learn naturally because we enjoy learning. We learn because it helps us to survive. It helps us to thrive in the world. And if I think we shift the focus on why, then automatically everything shifts in terms of the how and even the what. Um, Now, I think we're at a beautiful time, if we embrace it, that we're at a beautiful time where outer mastery is no longer going to be the significant thing. Inner mastery is going to be the significant thing. And I'll tell you a little bit why. We have to understand we're at that interesting and also worrisome crux of two economies almost in conflict with each other. So on the one hand, we are in the midst of the creator economy. So no longer is any information valuable, because information is available free from various sources. How do you build new value because of what you've learned here, and you build new value in the world? That is where the creator economy and the value comes in. At the same time, we're also, because of this creator economy, we're also in the midst of the distraction economy or the attention economy, where kids and adults, we're all constantly being distracted. If I really want to focus on what you're saying, I actually have to turn my phone upside down. I have to make sure everything is off. Yeah. And I have to consciously choose to do that. And this is the world of inner mastery. So we are at the interesting time where we can shift from teaching math, science, English to teaching kids about their own thoughts, how their thoughts affect their brains, how their thoughts affect their emotions, how their thoughts affect their behavior. And we actually can bring up kids to make intentional and conscious choices. And I think this self awareness, this shift to an emotional why of learning can kind of set the foundation for positive intentions. There's a reason why I've started what I call higher consciousness learning system, is because we do have today a lot of technology. We've got nuclear technologies, we've got AI technologies. We're in the world of technologies, and these technologies, some I had read a sentence somewhere which is so true. If you think you're scared of technology, understand that technology only amplifies human intentions. So if it only amplifies human intentions, and it always has, then how do we make sure that in a world going forward, we're not creating destruction, but we're creating, we're here to create creation. And that's only by actually focusing on intentions, values, and not through a moral teaching kind of way, but getting kids to, through mindful practice, reflective exercises, learning to get kids to pause and consider the impact of their, their actions, their thoughts, and sort of foster a values-based, thoughtful decision-making um, response over, impulsive reactions that humans are very, very prone to. I think then we can have a lot less of what we're facing in the world in terms of what's happening, in terms of wars and in courts in America and all of that. We can just have a sort of more intentional, mindful world.
Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful discussion by all our panelists. This marks the culmination of part one. And now we move on to the second part of this discussion on building a collaborative support system and the importance of collaboration for children. On first, we'll ask Dr. Swati Vats to please discuss the critical role of collaboration between parents, schools, and tutors, and how can technology be leveraged for learning and support, as well as please highlight successful collaboration models within schools to support students, including those with special needs.
So I think that's a wonderful question that you all have framed. Understanding collaboration, the use of technology, and special needs. I would also like to add one more here. As a country, we are quite focused on special needs children, maybe because of Tare Zami Par, but we are totally unfocused when it comes to gifted and talented children. And we have so many of them in our classrooms who are going unnoticed because we do nothing about them. We almost have a form of guilt that, oh, I can't focus on gifted and talented. I'm doing injustice to them. Just yesterday I had a parent who was speaking to me, and he said my child, who's 3 years, is interested only in the calculator, and he's able to write all the numbers forward and backward, and do all kinds of things with numbers, and I don't want him to be only focused on maths. And I said, your child could be gifted, and you're just ignoring that. So it's very, very important that when we talk about special needs children, let's also talk about the other end of the spectrum, because we are losing out on these children who may become naughty, frustrated, indisciplined in the classroom because you are not taking care of their needs also. So let me first come back to parents. Uh, Parents and schools have a long history of kind of being either at loggerheads, or have that schools have that keep off a signboard for parents that don't come into school, don't talk to us, and don't question us. I think that signboard needs to come down, and parents need to stop looking at schools only as a place where they can go to argue about fees. uh, Fees is something which is in your hands. Select the school whose fees suit you, and don't go to a school whose fees don't suit you, and then create all that thing, because India has a lot of choice. We have a lot of choice of schools. And I always also say to parents that you only raise your voice when it pinches your pocket. You never raise your voice when it pinches your child. How many parents actually raise their voice when the teaching in a school is not going well, or when their child is not learning things? They feel, I will complain, but don't take my name, huh? Because otherwise you will do something to my child. That mentality needs to go away. We need a partnership. We need a partnership between parents and schools, because it's ultimately your child which the school is educating. So nobody is powerful here. It's not a power play going on out here. Both have an equal role, both are equally important. And it's high time principals and teachers understood this, and it's high time parents understood that we can't have this at loggerheads kind of a situation when it comes to partnering with schools. So, should schools use apps to communicate with parents? Let me tell you, in my experience, parents don't read circulars, whether you send them on apps or you send them on paper. What's required is more of collaboration. Pick up the phone, talk to a parent if you need to. Understand that you'll have all kinds of parents in a classroom. Don't label them. Have a one to one with each parent in your classroom. That's the only thing that works. Don't have open houses which are like speed dating, where you sit in front of a parent for 5 minutes and they say, "Time up, next parent, please." What's the use of such an open house? You have online now. Why don't you have a open house with each parent on Zoom, so that there are no other parents sitting behind and listening to what you're talking to each parent? You can do so many different things when it comes to collaboration. So it's very, very important that let's not use only that apps that schools have invested in, and they put those things there, and then they feel, oh, I have communicated with parents. No, you've not. You have just messaged a parent. You've not communicated to the parent. So I think if we focus more on teacher parent, school parent communication, collaboration, things will become much more easier for people like me and Lina, who are trying to bring about change in education. And most of the time, schools and teachers say, but parents nahi manenge. I don't think parents nahi manenge. Parents manenge if you explain to them the importance of that change for their child, not for your school, for their child. So I think for me, that's collaboration.
That was pretty wonderful point. It was like the moment of this session. And in this regard, I move on to Lina ma'am. Ma'am, could you please share your perspective on building strong partnerships with schools and navigating the next gen learning landscape? Like what challenges do parents face and what can they seek for support?
Okay, so I'm really happy that we've got the supply demand shift has happened in education, where schools are also needing students to come in. So the barrier between school and parent, I remember when my kid was in school, you weren't allowed in the gate.
Yeah,
You know, and therefore you couldn't see that there was anything wrong with the school, and you were always happy because you couldn't, if you don't go into a dirty kitchen, you won't see a cockroach. But if you don't go into a if you're not allowed into a dirty school, you can't see what's going on in the first place, right? So
true.
I'm very happy that because we've got an influx, I think Swati mentioned about price points and stuff like that. The interesting thing is when you have when you open up the scope for various price points and everything, and you open up access and supply, then suddenly schools have got to figure out the best ways of moving forward with parents, rather than parents being on one side and them being on one side. And one of the things for parents watching, I really want you to understand something deeply, that your kids are affected energetically by the feeling you have about the school, the feeling you have about the teacher, and the feeling you have about everything that school stands for. So rather than say that I'm going to such and such school because my friend said it's really good, I would just suggest you go to the schools and you work out deeply what is the vision of that school, what is the philosophy and pedagogical framework that that school is sitting on, and what is the learning system, and therefore where should you go? That's uh, using the same learning system. Dreamtime Learning has got an online school which is at a much lower price point because it doesn't have the need for infrastructure, and we can just employ great teachers and use the LMS platform as an infrastructure. And then on the other hand, we've got, Yogi had talked about Gurukuls. We've got our version of Gurukuls, which are micro schools in Hyderabad and Pune, which is at a high price point because we can't get away from the fact that in India, real estate is really expensive, right? So you come at technology allows for this democratization and open access, and to use the same vision, pedagogical framework, philosophy in various formats. And technology allows actually for collaboration. If we look at the pain points of parents, you got two parents working, trying to make ends meet. Then a lot of parents then have to come home and wash dishes and cook and clean and do everything. And then we are calling them constantly, come pick up your uniform, come for orientations, come for this, come for that. As Swati said, why don't we use tech allows for the orientation to have open access to a parent, where a parent is spending half an hour, 40 minutes instead of half the day gone. Why don't we use technology for uniforms to get to the home rather than parents having to come to school to do that? So if a school starts looking at what are the pain points of parents and how do I cut those pain points down, a parent automatically starts becoming becomes happier and starts engaging a little bit differently, right? And it's our job, for any school who says that parents don't, what did Swati say, parents nahi manenge, is it's our job to tell the narratives, to tell the stories, to influence and guide parents in the way that wins them over to our side rather than us being in battle with them. And technology, um, one way is to, as Swati said, an app is just to communicate one way, which is, this is your circular or this is your academic forecast. But if you look at good LMSs, it gives parents access. It gets parents to understand which are the areas of high engagement and high interest that my kid is really, self-motivated by. And it allows, it actually, technology can also allow for this two-way collaborative process. The problem is that parents don't understand it yet. And it's like anything, it's like email. My father, when email first came into being, my father said, I will never use email. I will always use pen and paper. I will never use a Kindle. I will only use a physical book. And then it's our job to hold their hand and to gradually take them to understanding how email. And now my dad, I don't know the last time he's ever written something on paper. It's all email, and it's all Kindle, and it's all everything like that. So one of the other things, that was a basis of your question is collaboration. It's only when we absolutely shift schools and parents' focus from competition that we can start having a world of collaboration. Right now, it's okay. Our entire society is based on what mark did you get? Swati spoke about earlier that when schools stop saying, these are my 5 kids who got over 90%. I said there's no great job a school has done, because actually, firstly, they've taken the intellectually elite. They give them competencies for entrance into the school, and then if you post, if these are my toppers, you're not done anything as an educational institution. So if we can shift the dial from what grades, what accolades, what awards, to start celebrating what collaboration, what empathy, what kindness, and we can start celebrating those more often, then we'll actually see a shift from competition to collaboration.
True.
That was like a pretty great insight filled with logic, pragmatism, real world scenario, as well as lifetime experiences. Pretty insightful take. And now I move on to Yogi, sir. Like, we have discussed the what, how and why. And now I come to you to discuss the where of education and learning spaces. Please share your take on how you map the needs of parents, teachers, as well as students, and what's your take on it?
So,
Collaboration.
uh, I would try to put it this way that, when you talk about humans and humans connection to social society, or, other humans, that's where, why do we really go to school? I can be an individual learner at my home also, but I felt the need of school is because I wanted to belong to a community who at the same age groups, okay, or multiple age groups where I can learn. That's the first need where we, school become it. We are, people who are drop out from schools are also, doing great in their life. Okay, it is not that, So when we see, that's what schools are doing to us. So if I wanted to go to school because I see a friend telling me, yaar dekh kaise kar lete, it's easy. It's very, kind of simple communication to me. What's the teacher telling you? You have not done this right, you have to do it that way. So, look at from an instruction to a connection. Okay, so humans look for connection. When they look for a job in an organization, they try to see a vision of the organization, they try to see purpose of the organization, they wanted to see the culture of the organization. So at a school, what is the culture there? That's very important part of, seeing that as a community, how they're handling their teachers, how they're handling their parents, how they're handling other resources. So when I see all that notes coming in a cultural format, okay, I can see the ethos there. The ethos would be reflected right away. When you go to a house, you can, we come from an idea of, I say, the real learning happen where people, programs, and place come together. Okay, so we, I say Civom belongs to the idea of place. Okay, so when you go to a place, you can see the vibes right away. When you go to social, you can see, there's a different vibe they are created around, because that's all intentional. That's a purpose driven mindset which we try to bring around. Okay, so if I see a culture, a vision of a school, and I know what I need to translate into where of the learning. Okay, so I'm very inspired through, idea of gurukuls. Look at, the idea of caves. Okay, जहाँ पे चिंतन मनन contemplation used to happen. Okay, we used to have a self-directed learning. Okay, when look at, I'm from a rural background, so I know most of our learning happens on the chabutra, learning by sharing. So there's a lot of, so where this space available in the physical. And when as a parent, if you go to school, when you ask questions like, the vision, you say learning methods, the pedagogies, and look at it from physical perspective. If you are seeing a rows and columns, you can see the collaboration is not possible. I give a lot of time an example: sitting in a car, someone who's aside, sitting besides me, and versus someone sitting in front of me, where the communication would be effective or efficient. So, the idea of translation, that if I'm sitting in front of someone, I can read emotions, I can change my narration. Where are the signals of learning? Humans cannot produce, signal of learning that, there is a barometer which is reflecting high and low, and then I'm learning. There is no signal like that. Okay, but there are physical signals like, eye movements, smiles, noddings, participations, engagements, like dopamines, all of this is a very strong signs of learning. So are we able to see those signs of learning in the classroom when that's happening? So when you see a physical space, when you see collaboration, that's a very different setup. I was talking to one of an top level management education, and I was asking them the question: why do you really need lecture based system? Because they have tiers of rows, and there's a professor comes out, he dictates out, they take notes. Everything is changing. Look at today's office. When you want to go to workplace, you expect collaboration there. You don't expect competition. In your life, you have been taught competition. Suddenly there would be something going to happen to me, and I'm going to collaborate. So, like, Swati was mentioning about parents and the teachers. We as a community in India, we are not high feedback community. We don't take feedbacks very well. It's me first, then me as a parent first. Okay, now, so it will be Yogi rather than a parent. We have to see the narrative here. we have roles, and we are, as a person, we are different. So how I'm, actually taking that role. A lot of time my question in couple of brainstorming sessions is, do every individual have a right to be a parent? Do they deserve to be a parent? Because that's a very, very big responsibility that we really need to understand well inside us for that. If you want to test it out, have a dog, have a cat, parent them first. You'll see what it takes to do that. And look at, you're building a child, a young guy, a nation. Your contribution is much deeper there. So do we really deserve to be a parent first? If don't, don't be a parent, because you're
There
gonna
should be a license for parenting.
yes, there should be a license for parenting some way. Because it's like, you're biologically designed for that, but doesn't mean, it takes a village to raise a kid, and it's very true that there's so much happens around it, and you're making a citizen. Okay, so how are we really dealing to that mindset? And this is when I say, it needs that whole village. It's what the collaboration is needed. So that's how I know we should see it. We have to put ourselves little down as an individual and see the parent of us coming first, and not talking to let's say Swati or Lina maybe, but educators in them. So that would be the win-win for that learner. Because the biggest problem for people like us who's doing this work, our users are not decision makers.
Well said.
We are in the industry like that. So and how do we think about it? And if we think about them, narrative would come there, and everyone would agree for that, because the goal is to make their life better at the end of it. There can be disagreements, but that would go there. So yeah, that's my take on this.
Okay, so Yogi, so your points on parenting reminded me about two concepts of the startup world. Those are known as validation and proof of concept before becoming a parent, okay, before we launch a product in the world. And then your points before that reminded me of affordances, signifiers, feedbacks, and the power of collaboration from the book, from this famous book called as The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. So yes, that was a very insightful session. That was a part two of our session, and this calls for the culmination of this part. So now it's time for the final part of this session. I open the forum to all three guest speakers to recommend 2 to 3 resources or tools that can support parents and educators to implement next gen learning. These tools can be anything from online platforms to educational apps to assistive technologies, professional development opportunities, etc. So, Lina ma'am, let's start with your recommendations first.
Okay, my recommendations are 2 books for every educator and parent to read. The one book is called The Noticer, and it's a really powerful tool for a parent to understand perspective in a story format, and it's very easy to read, and it's very easy to read in terms of your kids. And I promise you, it's going to do a lot of things, including improve your marriage if you're married. It does a whole lot of stuff. The second one is The Biology of Belief. I think the book that has had the biggest impact on me as a human being is this book called Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. It kind of shows us, it shifted my understanding of learning, why we learn, why we exist, all of that, and understanding the nature of epigenetics and intergenerational trauma. Somebody asked me the other day, why do I do what I do when I've already made all the money I need and to do whatever I need to do? And I said, because through this book, I've understood the nature of intergenerational trauma, and I've understood the power we have, that if we can heal one generation, then humanity going forward has a lot of hope for where it goes. So the biology of belief is absolutely just about the um, how do I say it? How our perceptions, our thoughts, and our beliefs influence our biology and our behavior, and how just by changing our beliefs, we can change our experiences. And it's like a cycle that kind of goes around and around. And so, for me, if I had to give um, two books that I would say that all educators and parents should read. It's these two books. In fact, we teach the noticer in grade 7 at Dreamtime Learning as a powerful tool for inner mastery. So, yeah. And just before, I know this is the last thing, I want all of us, parents and educators, to start seeing that, that the conflict that exists in education is the customer and the consumer are two different beings. The customer is the parent, so you look to appease the parent, whereas the consumer is a child. If we can focus on the consumer and influence and change the mind of the customer, we'll have won the game of education and learning and the future of humanity.
So, Yogi sir, what are your recommendations now?
I would recommend a book called Culture Decoded by Daniel Coyle. You know, that's about setting up a social organization or setting up an organization. How does it happen that few people always success? There's a group of people who's always been succeeded. There's a village where everyone is going to army. You know, so how does that kind of culture really works around? So Daniel Coyle talks about sharing vulnerabilities and building trust. As humans, we are fearful breed. We test one vulnerability and then believe within second and then third. How someone is pursuing and reflecting back on that vulnerabilities, and that's where the trust building comes out as a process. And once you build that trust in any community, or even any individual also, that's where the real winning happens out. Okay. I have a PDF. I would like Abhilash to share it if he can. So I just wanted to show them this is one of the way to look at a physical space. How learning can happen. Look at your houses, look at your living areas. Kids can sit anywhere and still learn. Because I'm coming from a place mindset. I'll just show few of the spaces. So look at these spaces. All of this, it doesn't look like a typical mindset of a classroom. And one of the physical space which doesn't change is classrooms. Okay, so our image to I would say look at a Gen Z, and how would he dial a phone versus a digital native, for that matter. We might be dialing like this or maybe dialing like this versus their dialing is different. Okay, so similarly the idea of physical space is how so this is all workable. If there is a narrative, there is a vision, all that can be changed into a different way of real learnings. Okay, so when you see these spaces, you can, as a parent, right away, when you hear a vision, when you hear a pedagogy, when you hear about a program, and you see the physical spaces, the dots start connecting to you. You start making, and you can validate all of this, coming there. So if again the idea is, if it is as it has to be as natural as it can be. So like Dr. Swati mentioned about learners and their interpretation of learning or individual learning and type of learners, how they are coming together and learning together can be seen in those. So it's just kind of visuals where you can see what's changing in when people are changing their visions. Okay. So our physical space is allowing that, and believe me, when you go and work at your house or design at house, as a breed, we are not thinking about purpose in those also. Look at it when you're creating a residence. How many times we focus on living as a core idea versus physical home? How many times, what kind of questions do we ask? What kind of so how do you sleep? As what is your sleep cycles? Are you a dark sleeper, or you sleep in light? Okay, what smells impact your sensories? Okay, what is the quality of sleep you are going through? So we don't really talk about that as first, rather than what what kind of image or perception of that aesthetics of that bedroom is going to look like. So we have to look at a deeper context in delivery of the vision and the programs, and how physical spaces can really translate that to. So this is few, which is what been working around in and part of India. Okay, so and this gives a significant way of how do you see, and kids would your translation of, when kid comes on the first day or 2 days or 3 days of schools, they'll start talking about it. They can they're it's like they're much easy picker than adults, because they go filterless, they don't go with the biases, they right away start taking it, and the reflections are very very neutral. So I would end on the idea of what Dr. Swati mentioned about is um, what we really need to create is unfolding the potential of learners rather than molding them into something. Our job is to create a conducive environment and let them grow. Like, it's like agriculture. You plant a seed, you fertilize it, you grow it out, and let them take the shape they can take. If we get into any molding, it is your vision coming to that kid rather than his own thing. So he might be very happy right now, but he would may have like I had said, midlife crisis to any other crisis coming in, psychological demeanor, because uh, that's how people changes if their innate is not following. Okay, so that should be given them an opportunity to fly, unfold in the best possible way they can. So that's what should be our responsibility as a community. Thank you. And yeah.
Thank you, Yogi sir. Now I move this same question about recommending the tools and resources for parents to enable next gen learning for the kids to Dr. Swati Vats.
So I'm going to recommend books and apps. Two books that I recommend are Toto Chan. Every parent must read it because Toto Chan is a book, is a story about a little girl who learns differently. And imagine being removed from six schools before you are 6 year old, and how the teacher, Mr. Kobayashi, ultimately brings up this girl's innate desire to learn. I think every parent must read Toto Chan. I make every teacher of mine read Toto Chan. Number two, we talk about next gen learning, but there was a man in India in 1920. He designed a story pedagogy when it came to even fifth grade, and his name is Gijubai Badeka, and he wrote a book called Divaswapna. It's available free of cost. You can download it from the web. I feel again every parent must read this book because it will help you, understand that what your school is trying to do today is possible and it's much more beneficial for your child. The apps that I would recommend are right there on your screen. For parents whose children are in the age group of birth to 3 years, I would recommend an app called Born Smart. Born Smart has small 2-minute games that you can play with your babies and toddlers, and it helps in attachment, it helps in brain development, etc. Then, for all the parents and children who are interested in playing with blocks, there is a app called Brickit. You put a pile of your Legos and you take a photograph with your app, and it gives you ideas of what can be built, and then it makes it into a challenge. So it's a wonderful app. Try it. It's beautiful. I feel we don't involve art in children's lives. I know parents decorate their homes with a lot of art, sometimes turning it into an art gallery more than a home. But we don't involve children in art, Indian art forms, artists from around the world. Simple artists like Raza and his Bindu, or Henri Matisse and how he paints with scissors. So there is an app called Arts and Culture. I also like Google Arts and Culture because it helps you. Like if you go into Google Arts and Culture and you go into Raja Ravi Verma, it will take one painting of Raja Ravi Verma and help you use all your senses to explore that painting. What is the sound of the musical instrument in his painting, etc. I think it's brilliant. I feel we should inculcate art in children. There are puzzles available these days on Amazon using Indian art forms like Madhubani, Gond. So why not expose our children to that? There is a wonderful app called Hanuman. It is a language app. It's an AI based app which helps you translate into multiple languages. It was recently launched. And then, yes, the government has a platform called Diksha. So, for all the schools who feel, it's very expensive to invest in teacher training, at least enroll your children on Diksha platform and get some kind of a training for your teachers. So I would recommend all these things.
Fantastic. Indeed, fantastic recommendations by all three guest speakers. Thank you so much for these recommendations of books as well as apps and the web platforms. So now it's time that we move on to a quick Q&A session before we conclude our discussion. So the first question is for Lina ma'am, because someone has actually noticed that Lina ma'am has a master over curriculum development. So someone has posted on LinkedIn. His name is Mr. Ajay Kumar Bhatt. The question is, ma'am, do you fully agree that when every child is learning differently, do we not need a personalized book for every child?
One day we will get there to a personalized book for every child. Right now, till we've mastered using AI, it's not completely there. But what you can do is personalize the outcomes. So, for example, if you're giving kids an opportunity to perform their understanding, they can perform their understanding through creating a video or a written piece or a podcast. So there's personalization that you can bring into the way that they perform their understanding based on their absolute areas of interest. There are some things I think content wise that kids will need to understand moving forward, whether we've got an AI world based on outer mastery or not. So the day will come when we can personalize workbooks, but we are not there yet, given printing costs, etc., etc. The best we can do is personalize some aspects of it. The choice that we give kids some amount of agency, autonomy, and choice within the framework of what they're doing. Swati had mentioned earlier, we do personalize some things. For example, after every concept, we'll understand whether a kid has understood the concept or not, and then they go into a practice or an expansion class based on that. And an expansion class is not a more difficult form of what it is. It's just thinking about that concept in a divergent way.
Yeah, and book is most passive way of learning. It's a deeper but it's passive. So and we humans like very active way of more senses involved, more learning, impacting. So we might have to see it in that context also, that what can be that performance which is designed for individual to really have multisensory learning.
Ajay says we've developed it and wanted to showcase it to you. Please write to me at LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to have a look. And anything that takes the cause further, we're all open for collaborations across the board.
Exactly. The person who actually shared the question can please connect with Lina ma'am for more. Okay, so the next question is pretty exciting and it's for both of you, Yogi sir and Swati ma'am. Can you please share any examples from your experience where project based learning has led to significant student engagement and achievements?
So I would like Yogi sir, you can go first if you want.
I had seen in my real life, I would give my example first in that sense. I studied PCM, then I did computers, then I did MBA in entrepreneurship. I started a food business, and I got into botany of potatoes, carrots, how they work around. Start exporting to US in very early age, built that business, and then I got it. So it's a project for me in that way. When you get into something and you like doing it, you learn everything of it, and you are not you don't had a biology backgrounds. Okay, then I got another business which is on surface chemistry, and then I got another business which is into spaces, furnitures, metals, woods, soft cushionings, understanding human sciences, learning everything. So my point is, when you see a project in that sense, that humans come with immense potential. We have immense potential inside us. It is just directing to yourselves to that. The moment so project becomes it's like a tool for us. that you belong to that tool for I'd say when you design a learning, uh, it's like going to a wedding. Okay, if you are in a wedding for 15 days, your experience would be different versus being there for an hour. Okay, similarly projects are like that. If you are in project for 1 month or 2 months, your learning is much deeper, relatable to multiple disciplines also, and you get more curious. You get development, and which is a significant development that you can recontribute. We have, I know, and I asked this question a number of times, how to calculate volume of an egg. Okay, and we had done, I was a PCM student. We did integral calculus, differential calculus. We never knew that integral calculus can be used to calculate the volume of an egg. Okay, so if it is, the project based learning gives you this idea. So when we were working on a, to check a freshness of an egg, we got to see volume is, density is very important part, and to know density we need to know volume, and to know volume we need to design equation like that. So that connects to applied way of learning rather than doing integral calculus in life and never able to use them. So that's what project based learnings are, or for me that's how it is stand out.
Perfect. Perfect. Swati ma'am, over to you.
So, not many people know, because I am always in early childhood. Not many people know that I've done my B.Ed. And when I did my B.Ed in English and History, I was doing my lessons in a school called Hassanath High School, which is in Andheri East. It's run by the Bora community. And it was a completely project based school right up to 10th standard. And I used to give my lessons there. Or like for English, I was given the poem Lochinvar, and I did it with 10th standard children with puppetry. And it's not just showing them a puppet show, but it's involving them in creating puppets based on the characters of that poem, designing the clothes of that era, etc., etc. So there are schools like these which haven't come in the limelight, which haven't been noticed. I don't know whether they are still doing it. I did my B.Ed decades ago, but it's very important that now in my schools, whether it's literacy or numeracy, is taught through project method, because that's the best way children learn. So if you come to my schools, you will see a program called Symphonics for Literacy and Number Magic for Numeracy, done through the project method, and the results are there. Children are learning numeracy, not just recognizing numbers, but the ability to count, etc. So project method definitely does work. And it can have different definitions. Some people may do project work in different ways. For example, when we were doing the curriculum for the Maharashtra government's project called MIEB, which is Maharashtra International Education Board, we did a whole story based curriculum. So everything was linked to a story, all the concepts emerged from it, and it was completely project based, and it was for taluka schools. So it's not that project method doesn't work. You need the conviction and training, and it definitely becomes a success, and children show more interest in learning, more ability to showcase their learning, to understand their learning, like it's given in the NEP as Panchadi. So you have your Aditi, Bodh, etc. So all these levels, which a lot of these fancy schools call as Bloom's taxonomy, it's all evident if you practice the right project method.
So also, I would add to this, do we give them a choice to take their own project? Okay, as if I'm choosing my own project, I would be interested in solving it out. Versus,
Absolutely.
someone giving a project and asking them to work around it. Versus when
Choice always works best for the brain. The brain thrives on choice. So the more choice you give children, the better it is for their brain.
so it is kind of giving like India. Why don't we produce companies like Apple or Google? Because we are trained for skill idea, but not the human problems. So our human understanding problem identification is little lower. So, and because we have not been given choices like that. So if we can pick a problem and then solve it out, it's the best way.
Perfectly answered. And since Swati ma'am, you may know that in Gen Z we have this term when we say something as cool and exciting. This is very rad. So your rad idea has gone very well with the audience. And we have a question from Ms. Shivani Verma on LinkedIn that Dr. Swati, can you please once more elaborate on rad learning, RAD learning?
Okay, so RAD is an acronym. R stands for Reticular Activating System. It is a system that we have at the start of our spine, and it is that system which involves us in learning, helps us focus, etc. A stands for the amygdala. The amygdala is your emotional center of the brain. When the emotions are too much or too negative, the amygdala has the power to shut down your brain. So, teachers need to understand that they cannot bring in any kind of stressful activities in their lessons or in the classroom because it would activate the amygdala, if not in every child, in some children. So, some children's brain would be shut down while you are doing the lesson. Dopamine stands for dopamine, which is a happy chemical. It is also called as the hug hormone. It basically keeps you engaged, happy, in it. So when you involve these three in learning, in your lesson planning, in your curriculum, true learning actually happens. I've done a TED talk recently on stories of full brain workout, in which I've spoken in depth about RAD learning. If you Google it, also, you will get details on it. And I'll be posting a poster on this on LinkedIn also very soon, because advertisement companies know about RAD learning, and that's why they are able to get children hooked onto their advertisements. OTT platforms, reel makers, they all know about RAD learning. Sadly, teachers don't know about RAD learning.
Can I just add on to what Swati said about the reticular activation system? If you truly study the reticular activation system, it's also the science behind the law of attraction. It's basically, if you look at the research on why luckier people are actually more lucky, it is your reticular activation system, and you can
Manifest.
you
Manifest.
can manifest based on your thinking and your perceptions and your belief and your emotions and your feelings and all of that.
Okay, so those were quite rad answers by rad people for a very rad session that we had today. Now, let me sum up all the things that we discussed today, from Yogi sir talking about innate learners to Swati ma'am talking about rad learning, importance of understanding brain and full brain workout. Then Lina ma'am stressed on the importance of why we should focus on why we learn. And then we had a discussion over the books recommended by our guest speakers, and then the web apps and the Q&A session answered very successfully. And this calls for the closure of Q&A session. Before I propose the vote of thanks, we request all the viewers to also join us next month to celebrate Guru Purnima on July 21st, wherein we'll have many JNB alumnus joining us. So, on behalf of Civom, I thank our three guest speakers who joined us live for this session dedicated to celebrating Global Day of Parents 2024. Swati ma'am, Lina ma'am, and Yogi sir, it was indeed an honor to have you all with us today.
Happy Parents Day.
Happy Parents Day.
Okay. So,
And
and
read your children are not your children.
nice.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
just a second, please. And heartfelt thanks to every viewer who's watching this session live. You can explore many amazing things on the website and social media handles of Civom. Stay tuned for many more wonderful sessions coming up next to celebrate the world of education and learning spaces. Thank you.
Thank you.